Hello and welcome to my presentation for Assignment 1 for the Award in Education and Training. My name is Martin and I am a trainer at Voluntary Action Leicestershire. I'm going to be covering 4 different criteria, I think, on the assignment. The roles and responsibilities of a teacher, assessing need, equality and diversity, and summarising legislation. And I'm going to do that in about 10 minutes, I think. So there are 5 different key responsibilities of a teacher in education and training, and they are, first of all, to assess the needs of learners, secondly, to plan a decent teaching session, thirdly, to facilitate in a way which is inclusive, fourthly is to assess your learners so that you know that they can do or they know what it is that you want them to do, and the fifth one is to quality check, to assess how well the session went, to reflect on it and to make any changes that need to be made. So I'll just explain a little bit about each of those. The first one is about identifying need. So obviously you need to know, even if it's a really short session and you don't know people beforehand, you need to assess exactly where they're at and what it is they require out of the session, because if you just plough ahead with the stuff that you've got without even checking in them, then you might miss various different things which are crucial, like barriers to learning that they might have, so disabilities or particular learning requirements. So you can assess need in a number of different ways. You can ask people questions, you can get them to fill in enrolment forms. In our organisation, what we do is to get people to fill in an enrolment form, so they tell us about any particular requirements. But at the beginning of a session, I personally think it's quite important just to say to people, what do you want, where are you at, how much do you know already? If it's a workshop, then that's probably all that you can do, other than observe people as you go through. This is my wife coming in at the moment. It's like that video when the baby comes in. The second one is about planning. So planning is going to involve writing lesson plans or scribbling something on the back of a cigarette packet, something with timings on, and your key lesson objectives, and roughly where you're going to get, what resources you're going to use, and anything else that you might need. In our organisation, what we do is we have lesson plans. We have a standard lesson plan which I use and I encourage other people to use, so that they can be shared amongst staff. But planning involves lots of other things. For our organisation, as far as planning is concerned, we have to contact the front of house staff so they know who's coming, but particularly if it's an accredited course, then we will need to tell the examining body who is registered and give them their contact details, etc. Set the rooms up so everything is hunky-dory. The third one is around facilitating an inclusive learning session, and that can cover a range of different things. The most important things are making sure that everybody's involved, so regardless of levels of ability, you've got involvement of all the learners. So that's a variety of different methods, making people feel comfortable, doing icebreakers, ground rules with everybody, and just checking in the people are okay. And also communication, making sure that you try to express yourself in a way which is relatively simple, or rather meets the needs of everybody within the classroom. The fourth one is about assessment, which is making sure that you've checked in with everybody and you know what they're doing. Teaching is not about talking, it's not just about talking, it's also about checking that people have actually understood what it is that you want them to do. And that might be formal testing or informal testing. In our organisation, on our non-accredited learning, it's mostly informal assessment, so we'll ask questions as we go along the way or set little quizzes or tests or whatever it might be. In accredited learning, our assessment is through portfolios and assignment questions, which are usually presentations just like this. And the last one is about quality assurance, which is something which you can miss, and it's about evaluating the session that you have. We have specific forms which we give to learners, so we get feedback from them and that gets fed into kind of an improvement plan for our particular department. It might be other organisations which are smaller don't do that. We also ask our teachers to reflect, not just after the session but during the session, to make sure that what they've got planned isn't just continued with, even if it's not working for the learners, but to make subtle changes if and when they're needed. So that's the teaching and learning cycle. Those in a nutshell are the responsibilities of a teacher in education and training. The second one is about need and why we bother assessing need, and I've already mentioned why we do, the ways in which we look at learner needs. There are various different reasons why you do it, but for me, one of the most important things is obviously that learners are enabled to overcome any barriers for learning that they have. So learners will bring with them various different things that they like to do, but things that they don't like to do, or things that stop them from learning. And if you find out what that is, then obviously they're much more likely to be able to achieve. And the second one, which is a cowardly one, is because if you identify learners' needs, then they're much less likely to leave or to have any kind of sort of behavioural issues in the classroom. Even if you work with adults, they can still cause problems for you, and often it's because you haven't planned the session properly. So if you find out where people are at, then you're much less likely to frustrate them. So these for me are the key reasons why you identify learners' needs. The third one is a question about equality and diversity. And equality and diversity relates to the responsibility that you have to make sure that you don't discriminate against anybody and that nobody is at a disadvantage within your class because of any characteristic they might have, like their sex or their ethnicity or their age. So there are millions of different ways in which you can do this, and we've already covered one. That's finding out what people need and then trying to do something to enable them to overcome those things. So the most fundamental thing we do is to check whether people have got any barriers to learning, so dyslexia, and whether or not people have any mobility issues. So if they, for example, have mobility issues, then we try to put them on a ground floor or schedule the training on a ground floor. But also about the way in which you facilitate the session. So if you've got people with hard of hearing, for example, they might have already methods of overcoming that, whether or not it's sitting closer to the board so they can hear, or using resources which are much better for them. And on this course, we've had lots of examples of people who are blind, people who are hearing impaired, and we've managed to adapt some resources so that they were able to make some progress in the same way as anybody else. And I'm sure you'll have some good examples as well. The fourth one is about legislation, and we could go on forever about various different bits of legislation and codes of conduct that there are. Obviously, health and safety is an important thing. We don't have very many health and safety issues in the classroom, but I always do a warning at the beginning of the class to say to people that everybody in the reception is a first aider. I give out the fire regulations at the start of the class because obviously we're governed by sticking to the fire regulations. As far as actual regs are concerned, we are running an accredited qualification now, so we're governed by AIM Awards. And AIM Awards want to make sure that if I'm teaching you and I'm giving you a teaching qualification at the end of this, that I've abided by the rules. And so they've got various different rules to make sure that I don't cheat. So one of those practical things is that as well as me marking your work, I have to have somebody marking my work, marking your work. So there are two people that can be marking your work. And also they've got various different policies like conflicts of interest policies. So if I'm married to you and I'm teaching you, or if I'm related to you and I'm teaching with you, or I'm working with you and I'm teaching you, then somebody else has to take over a bigger responsibility for marking because there's a potential conflict of interest there. So we're governed by lots of different rules. And there are rules as well about the way in which you conduct yourself as a staff member. So lone working would be a good example of that. I used to work for Leicester College and I was actually disciplined for breaching one of our lone working procedures because I was in a situation where I went round to a learner's house to pick up some books from them because they'd asked me to pick them up on my way back from work, and I dropped in, I'd gone in for a cup of coffee and they trapped me in the house. And the authorities got involved, etc., and then I was found to be in breach of those. So there are various different rules and regulations which are set there for you to abide by, and you should do that. So that's a brief introduction to the things that I do. And lastly, there are a couple of other things which I can cover in this, which you might want to cover, and they relate to working with other people within the organisation and outside. So this is the question about other professionals that you might need to deal with. Now, I've already mentioned quite a few of those. So we have to deal with lots of people in the accrediting body, so I pass on information to the examiners, to the external examiners, and the internal verifiers. I have relationships with all of those. The people on the front of house, because I have to tell them that you're coming. Admin staff, if they're helping me to prepare portfolios and what have you for you. We have a quality manager, and I have to pass on all the information that you've given me about your evaluations and all that, so they can check to see whether or not my teaching's up to scratch. I'd like to be able to say somebody does my photocopying for me, but I'm not that powerful. So we have relationships with lots of other professionals, in-house and externally, and I'm sure you do too. And then the last question is about referrals to other agencies. And it's important as a teacher that we recognise that there are boundaries, and sometimes learners will ask us things or ask us for some support around things which we cannot sort ourselves. So this is about who do we pass that stuff on to, and what kind of issues might they be. So over the course of the last sort of 20 years that I've been teaching, some of the key issues have been around health problems for learners, mental health problems for learners in particular, and I've always passed people on to our safeguarding officer in-house, or if they haven't been there, then I've passed them on to social services. There have been some as you can imagine, some kind of sort of depressing cases about people really getting worked up as a result of the course, and we've had to assist them to find help. There have been some financial issues. When I was working at Leicester College, we had welfare officers and what have you that we could pass people on to. We don't have that infrastructure here. And another thing which crops up quite often is our study skills issues. Now, we don't have a big study skills department, so in the event that you needed to write an essay, or you were worried about your writing and you weren't too sure how to do it, then we don't really have the capacity to be able to do that. But we do work closely with the Adult Learning Service, and they have key skills courses, functional skills courses, etc. And we pass people on to those to be able to give them some kind of support. So we don't leave people in the lurch, and we don't try and fix everything ourselves. So that's been a whistle-stop tour, but it's been my answer to the first 6 questions on this course. Those are about roles and responsibilities, equality and diversity, need, some of the legislation that needs to be covered, and also I covered a couple of others about the people that we work with. I think that I have answered those questions reasonably comprehensively. If you have any more questions, then please ask. Thank you.